So here's a thought. What if the future of an entire continent didn't start with a handout, but with a fist in the air, with defiance? It's a pretty powerful thought experiment, really, and it's all been sparked by what's been happening in Burkina Faso. It's got people imagining a totally different future for Africa. So let's dive into what that could actually look like.
And that brings us to the big one. The question that, according to the source material, a lot of people are afraid to even ask out loud. What happens if Africa's two heavyweights, Nigeria and South Africa, start to think the exact same way? If they catch that same defiant spark we're seeing bubble up elsewhere? I mean, seriously, would the rest of the world cheer them on? Or would they start to panic?
Okay, so how do we even get to this point? Well, it all starts with a single spark. The source we're looking at really points the finger at Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso. The argument is that the actions of this one leader and this one nation have set off this huge chain reaction, sparking massive conversations all across the continent and getting the world's attention.
Now, what's really interesting here, according to the source, isn't just what Traoré did, it's his whole vibe, his attitude. He's all about what's being called sovereignty without apology. And that really makes you stop and think, right? When was the last time you saw an African leader get up and talk about their country's future without, sort of glancing over their shoulder, looking for a nod of approval from the West?
And this is absolutely the crucial point. The biggest move wasn't about politics or the military. Nope. It was psychological. It's like, by getting foreign troops out, the real win was getting fear out. And you know what happens when fear leaves the room, right? All these new, bold ideas suddenly have the space to rush right in.
Yeah, as one source puts it perfectly, Burkina Faso has shown us the way. The bully can be defeated. So this isn't being seen as just some isolated incident, not at all. It's being viewed as a blueprint, a live demonstration that the old, established power structures, they can actually be challenged.
So the spark has been lit. And now, this whole thought experiment pivots to the continent's so-called sleeping giants. Yeah, the focus shifts squarely onto Nigeria and South Africa, and the massive question of what it would mean if they, finally, started to stir. And these two, they're not just big. They're presented as a perfect match, almost like two sides of a very powerful coin. You've got Nigeria, this absolute cultural and demographic heavyweight. We're talking massive population, incredible spirit. And then there's South Africa, the industrial and strategic anchor, the one with the sophisticated financial systems and the heavy-duty infrastructure.
I mean, just think about what happens when you put them together. Nigeria's got the oil and gas. South Africa's got the platinum and gold. Nigeria brings this enormous population, sheer human capital, while South Africa brings the advanced skills. You put all that in one pot, you've got all the minerals, all the energy, and all the people you need to build a genuinely self-sufficient continent. It's all right there.
But, inside these giants, the pressure is building, especially among young people. In Nigeria, they're starting to ask these dangerous questions. They're looking around at all this incredible wealth their country has, and they're asking, so why are we still poor? They see these international loans that feel more like chains, and they're looking at a small country like Burkina Faso and thinking, hey, if they can be that bold, why can't we? South Africa, on the other hand, is playing a totally different game. It's this quiet, slow, strategic kind of resistance. It's not shouting from the rooftops, it's playing chess. By co-founding BRICS, by practicing non-alignment, by just flat-out refusing to be told which side to pick, it's getting itself ready for a world with many powers, while a lot of others are still trying to get a pat on the back from the old ones.
All right, so what happens when you combine Nigeria's sheer numbers and energy with South Africa's quiet strategy? What do you actually get? Well, what you get is a vision for a real, practical, unified way forward for the continent. And the source lays out a super clear, actionable plan. This isn't just about good feelings and political speeches. We're talking about real, concrete economic teamwork. First, you industrialize together. Build the factories right there on African soil. Second, you process your own resources. Stop shipping out raw stuff and start creating higher value goods and skilled jobs right at home. Then you harmonize trade. You build the roads and railways to connect your people and your markets directly. Every single step is a deliberate move away from dependency and a step toward real self-sufficiency. And the sheer scale of this vision, it's just immense. 1.4 billion. That's the population of Africa. Now just try to imagine harnessing the power of all those people into one single integrated market, a continental free trade area that's a living, breathing reality, not just some dusty agreement on a shelf.
The potential is, well, it's staggering.
And what's the core goal here? It's simple: to finally break this crazy old cycle. You know the one. The system where Africa's raw materials are taken for cheap, shipped overseas, and then sold back to Africans as expensive finished products. The whole vision is to build the power, the factories, the skills to refine, process, and manufacture right there for Africa and for the rest of the world.
But this brings us to the final, and honestly, probably the most important part of this whole discussion. The biggest hurdle here isn't about logistics or money. Not really. It's a battle of ideas. It's all about a fundamental shift in how people think.
And this leads to a huge paradox, a real contradiction. Everyone loves to praise the idea of African unity. It sounds great in speeches, right? But the second Africans actually try to make it happen for real, all of a sudden the language totally flips. It's no longer framed as progress, it's framed as a threat.
And you have to understand, this switch in language is an incredibly powerful tool. As soon as Africans start to define themselves on their own terms, the words get twisted. Suddenly, freedom fighters become extremists. Sovereignty gets relabeled as instability. And a leader showing confidence is reframed as a dictator. It's a battle of narratives, a fight over who gets to tell the story.
Which, of course, forces you to ask a really critical question. If a united Africa is supposedly so dangerous, who is it dangerous for? The source really pushes us to think hard about who actually fears a strong, unified, self-reliant Africa. And more importantly, why?
So, when you boil it all down, the message is one of radical self-reliance. It's about completely rejecting the old idea that the answers are going to come from Washington or London or Beijing. The argument is simple. Africa's salvation isn't coming from outside. It lies right there on the continent itself, in places like Lagos and Johannesburg, working together. And that really gets to the absolute core of the issue. This isn't just about which leader is doing what. The real, fundamental shift that's happening is a change in thinking. It's about what happens when an entire people, an entire continent just stops waiting for permission to build their own future. And so, we're left with this one last powerful question to chew on. What actually happens when giants, who have been told for centuries to act small, to think small, finally stand up and remember just how big and strong they really are? Because that thinking, it's already started. And as the source reminds us, once the thinking changes, history has a habit of following right behind.